Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Indy's Trusted Servant Show on InspireSmall.biz. I want to thank Ryan Henry, the major domo of InspireSmall.biz, for hosting the Indy's Trusted Servant Show on YouTube. Every Monday at 3 o'clock, a new episode will go up. What is Indy's Trusted Servant? Well, that's me. I'm Danny O'Malia, and I do customer service training and keynote speaking about customer service and organizational culture. I learned all of that from the hand of the master, my late father, Joe O'Malia, at O'Malia Food Markets, but actually many years before that, going back to the time I was 9, and Dad had me working at a little grocery store in Broad Ripple at the time. What's the Indy's Trusted Servant Show? Well, I like to describe it as lively local small biz and community talk where you can feel the pulse of Indy. And today's guest is a longtime friend, whom I've known since he was a little kid because his mom, the late Patty Horrigan, was kind of like Joe O'Malia's Girl Friday, if you will, for many, many years. Just a great family friend. Played a lot of amateur basketball and softball with this guy back in the 70s and 80s. And we've just been good friends forever. His name is Kevin Horrigan. And Kevin has a great background in the athletic area, high school athletics. He was track coach at Chittard. He was a track coach at Brebeuf. Then he became the athletic director at Brebeuf. Tell me if I get anything wrong.
You're doing good.
Then he was an athletic director at Lawrence Central and then Greenfield. Right. Retired from the athletic director role. He's now with the IHSAA. And he actually, I believe, manages the boys and girls state basketball finals. And there's some history behind all of that I want you to get into, as well as the track finals, right?
Correct. Not the girls. There is a different director.
For the girls track.
For the girls basketball.
The girls basketball is different. You just do the boys basketball, boys and girls track?
Correct.
Okay.
And unified. Unified is special needs.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that existed.
It does under IHSA auspices for only about 7 years. And I'm going to go ahead and take this off. I just wore it because I was advertising for the IHSA, or if somebody wanted to see their website.
He's flying the colors.
Right there. But I got my IHSA hat on, so I'll take this off now.
All right.
That's a lot better.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us a little bit about, I kind of outlined your history as far as being an athletic director and a track and cross-country coach. But tell us how you got into this role with the IHSAA, and I also want to talk about how you feel about the current state of high school basketball, track, and so on and so forth. But let's get into the Kevin Horrigan history a little bit.
Okay, and you did a very good job on where I've been, etc. Only one exception there. I started at the same place my teaching and coaching career as you did, meaning
That's right.
St. Andrews Grade School on East 38th Street, baby.
I forgot about that. You were there pretty much. See, you're 5 years younger than I was. I was there for 4 years, so just 2 years after I left, you came there.
Yes.
Right?
And then and you made your way on to Cathedral.
Yep.
And so my footsteps were right out of college. So I grew up in Indianapolis. I went to Brebeuf up on the north side, and then I went to Bellarmine. At that time, it was college. Now it's grown up. It's a university down in Louisville.
And they just went D1 in
basketball. They went D1 last year.
And they're 500.
Yeah, they're I tell you what, they're doing okay. And I tell you what, they played Duke, they played UCLA, they've played some of the big boys, but they're in the ASUN conference and doing very good. They're in second place in their division, and they have a 2-division conference. So I think they'll at least make some waves that way.
Good start in D1.
Yeah, definitely. But my first job out of college was at St. Andrews Grade School on East 38th Street. And it was funny because, like you said, you were there. Now I was history, you were English, if I remember correctly.
Right.
And you were there with more famous people. There was a soon-to-be U.S. Congressman, I think David Evans. And that's who I replaced. And then Sammy Terry with his other name. I believe, the music and art teacher there.
That's right.
So, and I know Sammy Terry around Halloween, people still get to see him, etc. But you and I, like you said, we go way back. Our families were great friends growing up, etc. And with O'Malley's Food Markets, that's kind of where I started when I was 12 years old back in the day when you can start working when you were 12 or younger than 16, let's say.
Yeah.
Child labor laws were a little different. No,
They were different.
Yeah, they were.
Especially if you knew the owner.
Yeah, definitely. It was a good thing. But I worked there actually through not only my years at St. Andrews, but my first few years at Chittard High School. I was working on Wednesday night in '78 when the blizzard hit.
And they stayed all night in the store.
We protected the store, exactly. And so, I was there till Saturday when I finally got out. But I remember the state police were snowmobiling in because Carmel High School was a evac or whatever you call it, a center for people. They could take them there that couldn't go anyplace, and they ran out of like food and everything. I still remember calling Joe and saying, can we give the state police like toilet paper and milk and blah, 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 blah? And he said, give them whatever they want. And
Boy, the blizzard we could do a whole story
Yeah,
on the
we
blizzard.
could.
Let's just
We
say
could.
this. Cows do not give more milk because there's been a blizzard.
No, they don't. No, they don't. But back in those days, again, working with you and your dad, so I grew up a lot of that same servant leadership kind of information and learned it, I think, fairly well. But I've always enjoyed teaching and coaching, and actually I started a track team at St. Andrews when I was there, and the old CYO Catholic Youth Organization. They have an A, B, and C. A is the older kids, B middle, and C is the younger kids. And so my last year at St. Andrews Grade School, we won the C-Class championship. And then from there I moved on to Chittard, and just like you said, and that's where I was really coaching track. Now, why I mentioned Chittard at this particular point is I got my beginnings with basketball while I was at Chittard. I was the announcer, I was the clock operator on the road. I would keep the book and a lot of different things like that, and we got along with a guy named Mike Allhan, who we worked a lot together. But while I was there, the athletic director at Chittard was working for a gentleman named Howard Catt, who was the athletic director at Tech High School for a long time. And Howard had the athletic director at Chittard as one of his workers at the state tournament when I was at Market Square Arena. So a couple times the AD...
Talking about the boys and girls state tournaments.
And this would be a basketball. So this is, for me, it's just the boys.
Just the boys, okay.
I'm not anti-girls, and I have done some work with the girls' state basketball tournament, but I'm not in charge of it. There's another director. I would be like a gopher or a worker, whatever you want to call it. But for the boys' basketball, when the athletic director at Chittard couldn't be there, he would recommend me to Howard. Howard took me, so at Market Square Arena, I got to like monitor a section or maybe bring out awards, or I did whatever they told me to do.
Now this goes back to what years?
This would be in the late 70s.
Okay,
and early 80s. And then when I went to Brebeuf, I was at Chittard till 85, and I started in the fall of 85 at Brebeuf, and I was there 5 years, which we had some great basketball players. That was the Vicky Hall and Alan Henderson years.
Alan Henderson, yeah.
And Alan Henderson was Mr. Basketball runner-up to Glenn Robinson from Purdue, and Vicky Hall was Miss Basketball and went and played at Texas and played in the WNBA. And there was another league, WABL or something, that preceded the WNBA. Anyway, she played in both of those leagues and actually played for Indiana late in her career. And then Alan had a wonderful career at IU, and then Atlanta Hawks, and so on and so forth. Lives back here in Indianapolis too. But anyway, at that time I got a little bit more involved with things, and the state tournament transitioned from Market Square Arena
to the Dome.
Yep. Originally the Hoosier Dome, later on the RCA Dome. And that's when I became more and more involved. And then in 1990, when I took the athletic director's job at Lawrence Central, I was definitely involved. I was one of the major workers under Howard Catt. And when 92-93 school year rolled around, Howard decided it was time for him to take it easy for a while. And he recommended me to Bob Gardner, who was the commissioner of the IHSA at that time. And I remember Bob Gardner and Howard Catt saying, we want to meet you at Butler University at this time on this day. And they wouldn't tell me why. So I went up there and I met John Perry, who was the athletic director at that time.
At Butler.
At Butler. Yep. And had no idea what was going on. And then all of a sudden they said, we want you to take over the tournament. And what they wanted me to do was, because in that day, sectionals, regionals, and semi-states were all three run at Butler University in Hinkle Fieldhouse.
Yep.
And if you go back in for a long time, Hinkle was the site of the state basketball tournament. So there was that rich tradition there, and that was awesome. And I got to the great experience of being able to run those 3 tournaments, 3 weekends in a row, and then cap it with going to the Hoosier Dome, RCA Dome, and then eventually transitioning Conseco Fieldhouse, same building, but let's see, it was Conseco, Bankers Life, now Gainbridge. I always have to stop and think about the different names for these facilities.
Yeah.
But anyway, that is 30 years ago. This is actually my 30th anniversary running the state boys basketball tournament for the Indiana High School Athletic Association. Ironically, that same year, I started taking over. Now, track is 15, 16 events, and you have all going on in a lot of different pieces of the puzzle. My particular piece of the puzzle is I'm in charge of the finish line. Everything that happens at the finish line. If it's a start, if it's obviously all the finishes except for the field events, awards, a lot of things like that. So I have done that for 30 years, also male and female. So it's easy for me to remember because...
Are the male and female state finals in track the same day?
Not anymore. At different times, it's gone through, depending if it was at North Central or IUPUI or Bloomington. Last year, we were at Ben Davis because of COVID, and we couldn't go back. High school going, and a lot of colleges, they've got to protect their own. So we were at Ben Davis last year, and they did a great job hosting it. But all those years, I've been in charge of the finish line. It's one of the best seats in the house to see the track meet. And then for the last 7 years, I believe it is, the Unified, which is that special needs. They have had state championships before, usually over at Terre Haute under a different auspices, but the IHSA has taken them over and actually has expanded their sports offerings. For example, they now have a unified flag football tournament again, just for special needs kids.
Great. That's great. That's good to know.
So I got off a little off tangent there, but going back at that time, it was Bob Gardner, John Perry, and Howard Catt browbeating me into taking over the tournament, which didn't take a lot of browbeating. It was quite an honor, and I was very humbled that they asked me.
And obviously, for you younger people, Howard Catt and Bob Gardner, those are names that people my age remember from the old days. Now, just to give you a little bit of more background, back when you were starting and the first 3 weeks of the tournament were at Hinkle, the state finals used to be played all in one day.
Yes.
Right? The final 4 teams came into Hinkle, played 2 in the afternoon, the winners played at night. That's changed, right?
Yes. And when we went to the class tournament in the late 90s, all of that changed. Now you just have 2 teams. Now we have 4 classes, so you actually have 8 teams and 4 games. So technically, we've got more games in one day.
Each team only plays 1 game in the finals anymore.
You come in on that Saturday, and the 1A game, take a little break, 2A game, take a big break, 3A, and then the 4A game. So you have 8 teams representing 4 classes. But you're right. Back in that day, sectional, regional, semi-state, and state, all was the same format. You would play. Okay, let's go back to sectional because that's where you have the majority of the teams. Some started Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Friday night, and then Saturday you would play your games too. But after that, everything was on Saturday, and so you would go a morning game and then a late morning going into early afternoon, and then come back usually at 8 o'clock at night for the championship. And the same was true for the state.
Now that was a great event with 4 teams playing, and the winners played that night. The teams that played in the second game had a distinct disadvantage because they had less time to rest.
Especially if it was an overtime or double overtime game, which we've had.
Yeah.
And so, there was, the rest factor, comes into play with those kind of circumstances. And sometimes you would see it. Some teams it didn't make any difference at all, but some teams it did, especially if it was an emotional game, an emotional win for them. There was definitely a fatigue factor that would certainly come in. And also going back to that time frame, we also had, for a period of years, not a whole lot, but we also put in at each of those levels, sectional, regional, state, semi-state, and state, the 3-point and slam dunk contest like the NBA and colleges were having. And then we also put in, at one point in time, the Tournament of Champions. Now that came later after we went to the 4 classes. So there was a period where you would have one weekend and you'd have your 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A play their games, and you get your 4 champs. The next weekend, they came right back, and the girls did the same thing, came right back, and they would play, luck of the draw, 1A champ might play 4A, and 2 and 3, and then the 2 winners class up at night.
I had forgotten
It was only
about
for
that.
about 2 or 3 years, because a couple things became obvious. First of all, fans, It was a lot because you're talking, if they're good, sectional, regional, semi-state, state, and then the tournament champions, that's 5 weekends.
Yeah.
And you got spring breaks and travel and a lot of things like that came in.
Yeah.
And what they found out is, again, as you build as a coach, you've only got a certain window of time that your kids can be on task and ready to play. And you win or lose, you hit that last game, there's an emotional release. Now, a week later, to come back and play another championship.
You've been the state champ. You're the state champ. Why do you want to play anymore?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It can only go down.
And a lot of those kids go into spring sports, and so it just became, I don't want to say cumbersome is the wrong term, but it wasn't.
It was more than we needed.
It was.
Yeah.
And results, and of course, then there was the argument, well, what if you're a 4AA team and you lose the 1A team? Well, basketball's basketball, but there was also that little stigma to it too. So it didn't last very long, but I'll tell you what, it was a busy time because I would have been involved all 5 weeks with that tournament.
One of the things I remember when they used to play 2 in the afternoon and the winners played at night was in the state championship game, a lot of cramping went on.
Yes.
Because of the 2 games, right?
Yes.
So
and then you had everybody and their brother trying to tell you what you could do for a cramp, like pickle juice, drink pickle juice. You got to drink a lot of pickle juice and orange juice and eat bananas in between game and tomato juice and V8. Well, I tell you what, there were literally coaches that would go out, like, again, most of them had a hotel or someplace like, unless they were local. And they would, all right, the assistant coach, go down there to the grocery store and buy out all the cans of tomato juice or V8 you can find and all the bananas because we're going to do nothing but eat and drink that until we get to come back to play. And hopefully avoid cramps.
Now, see, that's the kind of inside baseball stuff, or I should say basketball, that we brought you on to discuss, right?
We mentioned Howard Catt, and for those people that know Howard Catt, I want to at least tell this little story too. So Howard Catt was a longtime athletic director, and prior to that he was a coach and a trainer, etc., but all his years at Tech. So a few years back, not all that long ago, matter of fact, they made a movie documentary which had a premiere last year or 2 years ago, I forget which. Anyway, about the team from Tech that most recently won the 4A state championship. So we're going back a few years. 07 is in my head, but don't quote me on that. Anyway, or 17, I'm sorry. Anyway, they won the state and they were celebrating, and I went into their locker room with one of the practice basketballs that we have. So we have game balls, and we have balls for them each team to warm up with, etc. But they're all stamped with the IHSA seal, and it's a significant basketball. And I asked if I could interrupt for a minute after the coach had got done talking, and he said, yeah. And I said, I have a big favor for you. My mentor, who turned this tournament over to me, Howard Catt, I said, he couldn't be here tonight because he always went to all the Tech games, but his wife had been sick and he was with her, watched it on TV. So I said, I wonder if I could trouble you guys to please autograph this basketball and I'll make sure he get it. I had no idea they knew him. I had no idea, but they were just going nuts. Howard Catt, great guy. They loved him, and it was amazing. And so they all signed it happily, and the trainer said, well, yeah, we know Howard. He comes about 3 times a week. I said, what? So he still was going to Tech like 2, 3, 4 times a week, and all the basketball players knew him because he's in their gym, and he comes to all their games.
And he was in his 80s or something.
Oh, yeah, he's
right?
90 now, 90-something now.
That's cool.
But then I did go. I surprised him, and I took it over to his house, and I said, this is from Tech and from me, and he had no idea what was going on. I had it all wrapped up, and so I gave it to him, and he was thrilled. I mean,
that's really cool. So let me ask you a technical question about the classifications. In football, I know that if a team is, let's say they have 5 classes in football, and if a team is 4A and they win a certain amount of games in the tournament, they might go to 5A the next year.
Correct.
Right? Or if they do badly enough, they might drop down to 3A.
Correct.
Right? Now, those classifications start out based on enrollment.
Exactly.
In basketball, can they move up or down?
Yes. In all sports in the IHSA that are considered class sports, so baseball, softball, soccer, there's 3. Okay, baseball, softball's 4, soccer, there's 3, football is 6. Anyway, I'm probably forgetting a couple.
That's right. Football's 6. That's right.
But and football originally was 5. I mean, when I say originally, if you go back long enough ago, it was 3.
It was 3 when it started.
Yeah. Then 5. We've been around a long time, so now we're seeing it at 6. I think over in Illinois they've got 7 classes. But yes, you're correct, and that happens in any sport where we have class activities. Then by success factor through the tournament, not during the regular season, but if they are successful in sectional wins, regional wins, even if you make it to the semi-state, say you lose the semi-state, you've had to win your sectional and regional. So it's a point system that you earn points for, and then based on that, you either go up, stay the same, or go down.
Right.
And now the only thing is you can't go lower. Okay, let's say
you can't go two steps down.
So let's say in football, if you're a 4A school and you're 0-10 and you lose your first game for 3 years in a row in the sectional, you can't go down and play at the lower level.
2 level.
You're going to play at your, again, school population size-wise is what it's based on. 1 being the smallest, 6 being the largest, and so that way, that's how it works. And again, depending on if it's 3, 4, or 6 classes that you have in each of those sports, there is one other little caveat to that. And initially, it did kind of come into play. It doesn't seem to come in as much now, but there are some schools that choose to play up. So regardless of how you do in your season and postseason play, if you're a 3A school and you just tell the IHSA, we want to play a 4A schedule. It's going to toughen us up, whatever you want to do. I mean, we want to play in the 4A tournament for a couple of years, whatever. That's fine. The thing about the classification also is you're there for 2 years. No matter what happens, then they will reevaluate.
And you might drop down.
You might drop down, go up, or you might stay the same.
Yeah. I know a few years ago, as Kevin knows, I'm a huge Rabid Cathedral fan.
Absolutely.
And a few years ago, we went from 5A to 6A. And even though we won a couple of tournament games those first couple of years, it wasn't enough.
Right.
They dropped us back to 5A. Now we're going back to 6A.
Yeah.
So it can happen like that.
It can.
Right? So,
and the one good thing is whatever status you're in, it's for maximum 2 years before the reevaluation comes in. So it's not the end of the world. It's not like you're permanently going to be in that position.
Right. Or
down.
Kicked down to the same.
Right.
So what is your impression of course, you've lived through, you were there with single class basketball. And of course, the basketball is the big one in the state of Indiana, although other sports have certainly picked up. But what is your impression of the, and maybe this is a tough one for you, working with the IHSAA. Okay. What is your impression of class basketball versus the Bobby Plump, Milan Miracle stuff?
Right. Well, first of all, I have several different thoughts. Let me touch on Milan just for a minute.
Let me tell you, we got 5 minutes left.
Oh boy. Okay. All right. So the first thing is I'll say that a lot of people always just point to Milan as the last small school team to win the state. But I will say this, in those days when we had a Final Four of all the teams, there were many, many years where we had small teams that either were second, third, or fourth. Okay, so just keep that in the back of your head. Secondly, the other thing I'm going to say is fast forward to this current day, I don't see us ever going back to it. And here's why. We are now 2 generations removed, if not more.
People can't young people don't remember.
No, we do because we grew up with it. All right.
Yeah.
And people today, young basketball players today, they know nothing but the class tournament.
Right.
And their communities know nothing but the class tournament, except for the old timers. And I don't mean old timers negatively, please, because I consider myself an old timer. So you have that side of things.
Don't call yourself old. It makes me feel bad.
But I don't think you're going to see a big groundswell from Indiana population to go back the other way, because you have more people now that are used to a class tournament versus a non-class tournament. The interesting comment I had, I've always remembered this, is that when this first happened, the IHSA brought together student athletes from all over the state of Indiana to discuss things and talk about it and the ideas, and here's what we're thinking about doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I sent a number of athletes. I was at Lawrence Central at the time, and I had a soccer player, and I asked him what he thought about it. And he says, Mr. Horrigan, my opinion is you have an Olympics. And since we just had a Summer Olympics and we're in the middle of a Winter Olympics, this is pretty, I think, insightful on a young, let's say, I think he was a junior at the time. And he said, you go to the Olympics, all the countries participate, they all send athletes, and you have a gold, a silver, and a bronze. And it is just an honor to compete for everybody else in the Olympics. And I've always remembered that and thought, there's a lot of truth to that, I think, in the old one-class way of doing things is you get a first, second, third, and fourth place finish, but it's an honor to participate in the tournament. Or if you're in those 4, whatever size school you are, it's an honor to be there to represent your community and your school in a state tournament. So I've always kind of remembered that. But again, I come back to, I just don't see us ever going back to it.
No, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle.
There is.
I mean, we go back, and you'll remember this even though you're younger. I go back to the sectionals at Hinkle Fieldhouse, which was then Butler Fieldhouse.
Right.
14 schools.
Yep.
Places jammed.
Yep.
Everybody's wearing their school colors.
Yep.
And one of the most heartening things was, one of the schools in that tournament was the deaf school.
Yes.
And you didn't want to play the deaf school, even though you were going to beat the deaf school, because the other 12 schools were going to root against you.
You better believe it.
For the deaf school. And it never got louder than everybody rooting for the deaf school. That was pretty cool.
And even though they were deaf school, it was in the late 60s. There was a kid from deaf school who led the city and the county of
I do remember that.
I can't remember his last name, but he was the city county scoring champion for basketball as a senior. And that was impressive because he could not hear. But yeah, you're right. And I think it was probably the generation before us. But you know, those games would start, you would get out of school like on a Tuesday afternoon.
You got out of school for a while.
Yeah, you got to go out of school and go and during the week. You know, I mean, that's how big it was.
It was huge. It was huge.
Yeah, it was amazing.
In the last couple of minutes, what do you want to say about the IHSAA, the basketball finals, track, whatever? We got 2 minutes.
I will say this, for both sports, it's going to be so much better this year than last year, which was 1,000% better last year than it was the year before when we had to cancel it.
Yeah.
And then last year we got it back. But like, for example, last year in basketball, it was 500. We had 500 tickets, 500 or 1,000 tickets per school. So let's just say 1,000 tickets per school. 2,000 people in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. All right.
Not very inspiring.
Then you got to clear them out and clean everything. Bring in another 2,000. So you're right. And echo and no bands. So I mean, it was a different. We got it in and we played it, and thank goodness we crowned 4 champions. But this year, fingers crossed that everything is 100% go. Full crowds, etc. That excitement is back. And the same is true, we hope, for track.
I remember 2 years ago in the football, and Cathedral was playing the second game that night, and emptying the Lucas Oil Stadium, emptying that takes a little time, no matter how small the crowd is.
Exactly.
This past year, it was back, and it felt so much better. Kevin Horrigan, of the IHSAA, formerly of Lawrence Central and Greenfield and Brebeuf and Chittard.
And St. Andrews.
And St. Andrews, there you go. And the O'Malley Food Markets and our basketball and softball teams.
You got it.
Thanks for being with us.
The old Dearborn Hotel.
The old Dearborn Hotel League. Best amateur basketball in Indianapolis. Next week's guest on the Indy's Trusted Servant Show will be the founder of Catholic Business Exchange, Jim Liston. So tune in.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Indy's Trusted Servant Show. If you liked this episode, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more updates. The Indy's Trusted Servant Show is produced by InspireSmall.biz in Indianapolis, Indiana. For more episodes of the Indy's Trusted Servant Show, visit www.inspiresmall.biz/Indy's Trusted Servant. Thanks for watching.